Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the SimNFL show. Real talk about fake sports. I am your host and commissioner. You can call me Pierce. Today we are covering the first week of the Pro Football Playoffs over at SimSN. If you're unfamiliar, come check us out on the website and on Discord. We would love to have you. So we'll kick things off today with the stats and summaries from the 6 wildcard games that we saw last weekend. And then we're actually going to jump right into the Week 20 preview covering the divisional round. And then we're going to go into our features for today. The first one, as always, we're going to cover the existing extension news. There's a couple of new updates, which we'll talk about. But then we have a second feature, which is we're going to look back at the Week 1 hot takes from this very SimNFL show, the start of this regular season, see who was right and wrong, and make some commentary based on that. So thanks for stopping by. Let's go ahead and jump right in. The first wildcard game was a close game between the Steelers and the Chiefs and the refs, which we'll talk about a little bit along the way, with the Chiefs ultimately coming out on top. After a sack on the very first play, Kansas City went 86 yards in 6 additional offensive plays, with no play being shorter than 10 yards, and that drive ended with a touchdown pass to his tight end Van Slyke from 12 yards out to open the scoring. Later, Pittsburgh would put together their own scoring drive. They would go 76 yards in 11 plays, with Morris finding Ariel Lemon Jr. for a 12-yard touchdown pass. That would cut the current Chiefs lead to 10-7. But on the next drive, David Chop would go 5 for 5 for 71 yards, including a 24-yard touchdown pass to his receiver, Michael Walker, increasing the lead back to 10. Robert Morris would throw interceptions on his next 2 consecutive drives. And the second one led to a James Carter touchdown run from 6 yards out. Chiefs would miss the extra point, but it was still 23-7 at that point. In the second half, it was Chop's turn to throw an interception, this one to James Klasky. Klasky returned it to the Chiefs' 48-yard line. Morris found his wide receiver Paul Garul for a 13-yard gain, and then a 16-yard gain, and then again for a 10-yard touchdown, making the score 26-12 at that point. On Pittsburgh's next drive, it looked like they had a first down after a long completion, but that play was canceled by an illegal use of hands penalty. 3 plays later, the Steelers were also called for offensive holding. Ultimately, that drive led to a punt. But the next drive, Pittsburgh got it going again. Morris found Alex Williams for 15, Paul Garul for another 13, then Williams again for a 2-yard touchdown, making it a 1-possession game at 29-21. Pittsburgh's defense would then get a stop, and Kansas City would punt, but Mark Nelson, the backup running back working as the punt returner, muffed the punt, and the Chiefs would recover at the Pittsburgh 45-yard line. 6 plays later, Chop threw to Ellswick for a 20-yard touchdown, increasing the lead to 36-21. So huge turnover, big momentum changer there. In the fourth quarter, Danny Kipnis ripped off a 60-yard run, but then later another holding call on the Steelers forced a 2nd and 21. Pittsburgh would gain 20 yards on their next 2 plays, but they would be just a yard short after third down, so led to a short Gonzalez field goal, making it 36-24, still a 2-touchdown lead for the Chiefs. And the Chiefs' next drive, it looked like they would be stopped early when Chop was sacked on a 3rd and 12. But there was a pass interference call against the Steelers' secondary, which gave them an automatic first down. And this was a running theme, as you can already see in the game. The Steelers were called for 9 penalties, which cost them over 100 yards in penalty yardage, to say nothing of the plays that were canceled, at least on offense. So 9 penalties for the Steelers. A single false start was called on the Chiefs throughout the game. So back to the game, Chiefs leading by 12, and even though they were gifted that free first down, they would get into field goal range, they would miss. Pittsburgh would drive, trying to cut into the lead, but yet again, another penalty, this one an illegal double team block, turned what would have been a 10-yard gain on play into a 10 penalty yards. And then Pittsburgh, that drive got down to the Chiefs' 20-yard line. So had they been allowed that play, that 10-yard play, instead of a 10-yard penalty, it would have been a touchdown. Instead, they had a 3rd and 3, and Morris was sacked. So they were forced into another field goal attempt. So Pittsburgh still down by 9, still a 2-score game even after that scoring drive. Then with under 4 minutes to go, David Chop was picked off by Wilfred Price, and he returned it to the Kansas City 26-yard line. Morris found Garul for 14, and ultimately found Lemon for a 2-yard touchdown. That was actually a touchdown carry by Lemon, his second of the game. Steelers would miss the extra point, though, so it was 36-33 at that point. Kansas City went 3 and out, punted back to Pittsburgh, who did get the ball back with a chance to tie or win, but they had under a minute to go, and they went 4 and out, and the game ended. So yeah, strong quarterback performances, especially Robert Morris, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and 50 rushing yards. I mean, compare that to David Chop, 300 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and 60 rushing yards. So nearly identical lines from the quarterbacks. Danny Kipnis, 130 yards on 13 touches. Daniel Ellsworth, 180 yards, including a touchdown on 11 catches. Robert Berry had a couple sacks. Tony McCura had a couple sacks. Klasky had an interception. Weibao had an interception. So a lot of standout performances on both sides. And ultimately, the Chiefs come away with the victory. I think, unfortunately, the game will probably be most remembered for the 9 penalties called on the Steelers. Particularly that double team block, which cost them 20 yards on a drive that ended at the 20-yard line, and that defensive pass interference that turned a 3rd down sack into a 1st down. Even though the Chiefs didn't get any points from that drive, still a huge swing. There were definitely things you can point to on the Steelers side, like Mark Nelson's fumble was a huge swing, and they did get the ball back, the Steelers, with a minute to go, down by 3, and couldn't move the ball. So if you want to take this, the tack that Pittsburgh had their chances, you could. If you want to take the approach that 9 penalties compared to 1 made a difference in the game, you can. That's what happens in playoff football. Everyone's going to take their opinion. But at the end of the day, Chiefs advance with a final score of 36-33. It wasn't quite so close in Miami, with the Dolphins beating the Chargers 23-7. Miami, on their first drive, Hammonds hit Arden Giafor for a 27-yard gain that set up a long Genter field goal, a 54-yarder, which he nailed. Then on their next drive, Hammonds hit Kenny White for gains of 13 and 17. That led to a Juan Mora touchdown run from 18 yards out to increase the lead to 10. In the second quarter, Miami drove into the Chargers, inside the Chargers' 10-yard line twice, came away with a couple of field goals. Then late in the third quarter, Hammonds found Ramirez, his tight end, for 17, and then they connected again for a 24-yard touchdown, increasing the lead to 23-0. Now the Chargers would respond after that score. They would go 64 yards in 9 plays, with Aguilera hitting Harrison Rodriguez for a 3-yard touchdown pass out of the backfield. That would cut it to 23-7. But in the fourth quarter, the Chargers' 2 drives were consecutive 3-and-outs. On their very final drive, they did get into deep into Miami territory. The very final play of the game was an Aguilera interception from the Miami 17-yard line to finish the game. Dolphins come away with a 16-point victory. Dean Hammonds, 20 of 33, 303 yards, and a touchdown. Miguel Aguilera held only 97 passing yards, a touchdown, and that 1 pick, which again was on the very last play of the game. Also held under 50 yards on 12 carries. Harrison Rodriguez held to 46 yards on 17 touches. So Dolphins, for all that Hammonds and that offense, gets a lot of the credit, deservedly so. The defense really tamped down on the Chargers' rushing game and held them in check for most of the game. A couple other standouts. Jose Sola had 4 tackles for loss and a sack. Jesus Gonzalez also had 4 tackles for loss for the Chargers. Jeremy Moreland had more defended passes than tackles, which is a fantastic statistical performance for a cornerback. Brad Jones, a couple of pass breakups as well for the Chargers. But yeah, the Dolphins, with a consistent offense and a very tough run defense, beat the Chargers 23-7, avoid any upsets, and move on to the next round. The Packers beat the Dallas Cowboys 41-20 to advance in the NFC. Green Bay's first drive was a 53-yard field goal to take the early lead. Their second drive, Joseph Garibay went 6 of 6 for 71 yards, including a 6-yard touchdown to his tight end, Robbie Phillips, that made the lead 10. And then Green Bay's third drive, Carl Frost broke off a 30-yard run, and then Garibay found Nwachukwu for a 4-yard touchdown for the 17-0 lead. Cowboys were able to get on the board after that. Christopher Lee returned the ensuing kickoff all the way to the Packer 30-yard line. 4 plays later, Fuentes found Vladimir Dawson for a 1-yard touchdown, made it 17-7. And then the Cowboys worked their way back. In the third quarter, Jorge Mendez returned a punt all the way to the Packers' 7-yard line. So special teams playing a big part in the Cowboys' comeback. That led to Fuentes finding Arellano for a 7-yard touchdown, and then actually tied the game at 17 in the third quarter. So Cowboys were able to erase that early lead, but then Green Bay got to building it right back. Garibay found Nwachukwu for 29, then he threw to Ogba for 23. Carl Frost ended that drive with a 7-yard touchdown run, putting the Packers back on top. Then in the fourth quarter, with the Packers leading 27-20, Garibay had 2 long completions to Nwachukwu for 21 and 17. And then Cody Caspi, the backup running back, had a 27-yard touchdown carry, making the lead 34-20 with about 8 minutes to go in the game. And then late in the fourth quarter, special teams for the Packers doing their part. They returned a punt to the Dallas 26, and then Carl Frost made quick work of that with a single 26-yard touchdown run to give us our final score. So Packers getting it done with a very balanced offense. Garibay 312 yards and a couple touchdowns. Carl Frost 87 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. As we mentioned, Cody Caspi also a rushing touchdown. 187 yards on 12 catches for Walter Nwachukwu. And 3.5 tackles for loss and a sack for standout defensive tackle Leon Payne. On the Cowboys side, Cecilio Fuentes was mistake-free with 119 yards and 2 touchdowns. Vladimir Dawson toughed out 56 yards on 18 carries. And great days for Elliot Grossman with 4.5 tackles for loss, and James Wilson with 4 defended passes and an interception. But other than that one pick, everything went right for the Packers, and they defeat the Cowboys to move on in the NFC. In a wild game, the Commanders ultimately survived an upset bid by the Bears, thanks especially to special teams, winning this game 45-40. Washington took the lead before their offense even got on the field. After the Bears punted on their first drive, Randy Espino took the punt 63 yards for a touchdown. Then Espino again gave Washington great field position when he picked off a Gerald Lewis pass on the next drive. But Washington would give it right back when Gonzalez fumbled after a 17-yard gain. Calvin Preston actually forced that fumble, and Chicago recovered, preventing any further scoring on that drive. In the second quarter, the Bears tied it up with Gerald Lewis finding Stanley Segovia for a 22-yard gain. Then he threw it at Nick Evans for 14, then to Malero for gains of 22 and 20. They ended that with a 3-yard touchdown pass to Watson that tied it at 10. But Espino was back at it. He returned the ensuing kickoff 96 yards for a touchdown, immediately putting Washington back on top. Then in the second quarter, Washington finally was able to score with their offense. They went 75 yards in 12 plays, with Morrison finding his 4th wide receiver, Shane Armenteros, for an 8-yard touchdown, increasing Washington's lead to 24-13. Going to the second half now, early in the third quarter, Morrison had a drive with 4 consecutive completions to his tight ends, ending with a 3-yard touchdown to Sebastian Moore, increasing the lead to 31-13. Chicago would respond with Gerald Lewis, 3 straight completions to Jackson Freitas for a total of 48 yards, and then Lewis, a touchdown pass to Nick Evans from 2 yards out, cutting the lead to 31-20. Then after a defensive stop, Jonathan Watson had a 24-yard carry for the Bears and then a 24-yard reception on the same drive to set up a field goal and make it a one-score game. But Washington would respond in kind, driving 70 yards in 10 plays. Morrison finding Rodrigo Gonzalez for another touchdown, this one from 1 yard out, increasing the lead to 38-23. Then in the fourth quarter, Chicago drove all the way to the Washington 2-yard line, but they were forced to settle for a short field goal. And then Randy Espino returned to the kickoff, 92 yards for a touchdown, his third touchdown of the game on special teams, which gave the Commanders a 3-touchdown lead at 45-26. Gerald Lewis would respond, driving the Bears down the field and ultimately throwing a touchdown pass to Stanley Segovia from 5 yards out. That made it a 12-point game, but with only 2 minutes to go, it looked like they were out of luck. But on Washington's very first offensive play, Washington threw a pick six to Calvin Preston, which made it 45-40. Suddenly it was a one-score game. Then on their next drive, on second down, Morrison was sacked by Mickey Oxspring. Or it appeared that Oxspring was going to get his fourth sack of the game, but Oxspring was called for roughing the passer, and the refs gave the Commanders a first down. Commanders, and then 3 plays later, Morrison threw an interception to Calvin Preston at the Washington 37-yard line, but because of the previous penalty, Chicago only had time for a single play. They were unable to score from the 37-yard line, and the Commanders escaped. So, again, Randy Espino, 3 special teams touchdowns and an interception to lead the Commanders to victory, despite Jerome Morrison throwing for 4 interceptions. Calvin Preston had 2 of those interceptions and forced a fumble, so did everything he could to keep the Bears in it. Gerald Lewis also threw 66 passes, completed 43 for 446 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a couple picks. Mickey Oxspring had 3 sacks and was robbed of a 4th by a penalty. Avery Gonzalez also had 2 interceptions. So 5 takeaways for the Bears. But it was Randy Espino who gave the Commanders a big lead, and then despite Morrison's giveaways late, the Bears were unable to come back, and the Commanders had just enough time to clinch the victory. They win 45-40 and move on to the divisional round. Tennessee won yet another close game, outlasting the Jets 31-29. On the Jets' first drive, the Jets' very first drive of this game was 16 plays long. It took half the first quarter, 7 minutes and 39 seconds off the clock. And then on 3rd and goal, Michael Elias ran a 3-yard touchdown run. It was the 4th conversion on 3rd or 4th down in just that drive. The Jets would miss the extra point, so after 16 plays and half a quarter, they were up 6-0. Tennessee responded in just 6 plays, with Outman throwing to Joseph Cale for 13, to Thompson for 17, and then to Aquino for a 16-yard touchdown. Richard Job hit his extra point, and so the Titans had a 7-6 lead. Tennessee's next drive, Joseph Cale did it himself with a 42-yard touchdown run to increase the lead. And then on Tennessee's next drive, Cale had 7 touches in 8 plays, including a second touchdown, this one from 11 yards out, to increase the Titans' lead to 21-6. And then just before half, a crazy play where Michael Elias broke away for a 56-yard, what looked like it was going to be a touchdown, but he was tracked down, pushed out of bounds at the 1-yard line. There was a single second left in the half. So despite the long run, the Jets had to settle for a field goal, made it 24-12 going into the locker room. In the third quarter, the Titans picked up where they'd left off. A 9-play, 63-yard drive ended with a Will Outman touchdown run from 15 yards out, getting the lead back to 19 points at 31-12. The Jets then drove to the Tennessee 37-yard line. They elected to punt instead of kicking a long field goal, but that absolutely worked for them because 2 plays later, Will Outman fumble forced by Michael Hammond, and the Jets recovered. They were able to go 27 yards and score a touchdown. Will Huber with a 6-yard touchdown catch to finish off that drive. And it was 31-19. Then in the fourth quarter, Jesse Knoll broke off a 42-yard run on the speed option. That set up a field goal, so it was still a 2-score game at that point. And then later, the Jets would put together another marathon drive, going 82 yards in 13 plays. Michael Elias again scoring the touchdown, 19 yards out. And they kicked the extra point to make it 31-29 with just 4:16 to go in the game. Tennessee then went 3 and out and had to punt. Jets got the ball back, but in 4 plays were unable to gain a first down, turned the ball over, and the Titans ran out the clock to preserve yet another close victory. Will Outman, 13 of 17 for 116 yards and a touchdown. He also ran for 50 yards and a touchdown, though he did fumble. NFL rushing leader Joseph Cale had 188 rushing yards and 2 scores. Michael Elias did his share for the Jets, 23 carries, 163 yards, and 2 scores from him. Will Huber, 88 yards and a touchdown. So ultimately, both quarterbacks doing enough through the air and then also carrying the ball on the ground. But something about Tennessee just kept that magic going. They got the first downs when they needed to, got the stops when they needed to, got the special teams plays when they needed to, and then escaped with a final stand and win the game 31-29. In a surprising upset, the Lions used a tremendous second half to pull away from the Carolina Panthers and win 53-22. Carolina scored on their very first drive, with Link finding Kelvin Dupree for an 18-yard gain out of the backfield, then passing to Lovejoy for 22. That drive ended with a Kelvin Dupree 16-yard touchdown run. Panthers would miss the extra point, but would take the early 6-0 lead. Detroit would cut into that lead on their drive with a Tremaine Craig 52-yard run, setting up a short field goal, making it 6-3. But the Panthers would respond with Link finding Dupree again with big gains out of the backfield, pass completions for 18 and 25 yards. But Link was then picked by linebacker James Stewart at the Lions' 32-yard line, so no points there. Lions almost gave the ball right back. 3 plays later, Tony Sherman fumbled after a short gain, but tackle Tim Guerra fell on the ball, prevented the turnover. In the second quarter, after a trade of field goals, Link went 3 of 3 on a drive for 57 yards, and Kelvin Dupree ran in an 8-yard touchdown, increasing the Panthers' lead to 16-6. But Detroit would respond. Richard Bianchi had a 30-yard run that led to a touchdown pass from Hansen to Thomas Bullock from 7 yards out. The Lions then would miss their extra point, making it 16-12. And then right before the half, the Lions got a big swing as they drove 87 yards in 11 plays, Hansen finding Tony Sherman for a 15-yard touchdown in the final seconds of the first half. So Detroit went into the locker room with a 19-16 halftime lead. It was tied at 19 in the third quarter when Tremaine Craig had another long run, a 52-yard touchdown pass to break the tie and make it 26-19. And then the floodgates absolutely opened. Link threw an interception to Mike Presley, who returned it to the Carolina 21-yard line. 4 plays later, Hansen found his tight end Frank Moore for a touchdown, making it 33-19. Then late in the third quarter, what looked like a third down conversion for the Panthers when Link found Lovejoy for a 15-yard gain was wiped out by an offensive pass interference call, and that drive would ultimately end in a failed fourth down conversion. In the fourth quarter, Hansen led a little long drive. They went 83 yards in 11 plays. That included a 17-yard pass to Thomas Bullock to convert a 3rd and 14. That drive ended with a 5-yard touchdown pass to Sebi Bizzardo, making the lead 43-19. Then Link threw another interception to Mike Presley on the next drive. After a penalty made it 2nd and 20, Hansen found Thomas Bullock again for a 21-yard gain to convert. Then Bullock later a 1-yard touchdown pass to break 50-19 at that point, and then Detroit put in their backups and cruised to the victory. So, surprising quarterback lines: Dakota Link, 369 yards, 3 interceptions. Randall Hansen, 297 passing yards and 5 passing touchdowns, adding another 86 yards on the ground. Jermaine Craig, almost 10 yards a carry, with 149 rushing yards and a touchdown for him. Kelvin Dupree helped out the Panthers with 2 rushing touchdowns, even though he ended with just 20 yards on 12 carries. He had 83 receiving yards. Russell Barnes another 126. But the 3 interceptions from Link, including 2 by Mike Presley, and a very efficient and effective Lions offense, leads to Detroit with the big victory. 53-22 is your final score. So, to preview the divisional round, remember the NFL does not use strict brackets. The lowest remaining seed goes to the number 1 seed off their bye. So in the AFC, the lowest remaining seed is wildcard Kansas City. So they are going to Denver for the rubber match. Both these teams won at home, and Kansas City gave Denver one of their 2 losses. They are back. This one's in Denver for a trip to the AFC Championship. Would be Denver's 5th in a row if they can win. And then the other game, Tennessee is going to Miami to face the Dolphins, 2 division winners facing off there. In the NFC, Detroit is the 6th seed, so they are going to the number 1 LA Rams, see if they can work their magic again on a very good Los Angeles team. And then Green Bay is going to Washington to face the Commanders. Commanders seeing if they can make a 3rd Super Bowl in their 5-year history. So, we are still in the midst of extensions. They have slowed down considerably as a lot of teams have already made some big moves or made decisions on who they're not going to re-sign. But some big news out of Carolina as 5 new contracts were signed. Young Marco Thompson, 25-year-old receiver, is signing on for a serious extension. And then Carolina adding long deals for 4 of their starting linemen: Mendenhall, Eggleston, Whitaker, and Paul Caruso, all joining with various contracts. Caruso, they got a bit of a break because of his age. He's going to be 31 next year. But they're all 80 plus, so Carolina bringing everyone back, trying to continue this run, trying to extend their championship window after an early playoff exit this year. Other big news, Kamoko Allard of Seattle is coming back for the Seahawks. Seahawks reportedly not thrilled with the performance of Jeremiah West, so we'll see if Allard gets another chance at quarterback or how the Seahawks want to proceed from here. But Allard will be in Seattle for the foreseeable future after signing his extension with the team. We've also gotten word of several players who are going to be franchise tagged. So just a reminder, franchise tags look at the average of the top 5 players at their positions and what they're being paid this year. So it's a pretty hefty tag, but it's a single-year contract and it's automatically accepted. So for a lot of money, if you either had a negotiation breakdown with a player or just want a player on a very expensive short-term deal, franchise tag is the way to do it. So Hugh Kahn is an example. He's 28 years old. So hitting or past prime age for a lot of running backs, but he's the highest overall running back in the league right now at 80. So it makes sense. Jacksonville wants him on a short-term deal, tagging him for $7.4 million next year. Jan Miller of Kansas City, signing for $14.9 million. They're going to pay him next year for a single year on the strong safety franchise tag. Jamie Ramirez, after contract talks broke down for the Dolphins, he's signing on for $7.5 million next year. Sebastian Moore, also at his age 32 season, will be playing for Washington on that same tag, or that same price tag at least. And then Danny Kipnis, Pittsburgh fullback, is coming back next year on a $2.8 million franchise tag for fullbacks. So those are the 5 we know of right now. If there are more, we'll cover those in the coming weeks. Still to be signed or still being watched, we have a number of Dallas Cowboys. Cecilio Fuentes. As the weeks go on, it seems more and more likely that he will be hitting free agency. Could be a big target for a couple teams. We'll see if the Jets want to go for a Dallas to New York pipeline yet again. or what other teams might be interested. Eric Simon and Michael Cox, other Cowboys who could potentially be free agents at the end of this season. The Dolphins tackle Robert Anderson. He'll be 32 next year, but is still mid-80s. And then the 93 overall guard for Tampa Bay, William Chittum, also has not received an extension offer from Tampa Bay. We got David Stowell, the linebacker for the Chiefs, and then a number of big names in Pittsburgh. Von Johnson on that venerated defensive line, and then both safeties, Gomez Rodriguez and Cook, still without offers. Still big names to watch as it comes down to the final weeks of extension season. 3 more sinks to go after this. Final sink is the Monday after the Super Bowl. And then Glenn Setzer for Washington. I don't know if Washington has any money left in the coffers. If they don't, Setzer could be a free agent. We'll see who wants to snap him up. So, our other big feature this week, as I mentioned, I went all the way back to week 1, looked at the hot takes and overreactions I recorded, and wanted to revisit those, analyze them a little bit, and give my props where they were due. So first, Sweezy says Carolina's winning the Super Bowl. Now, before this week, I would have said absolutely. That offense looked unstoppable. Link put up insane numbers on his way to a nomination for some postseason awards, but they hit a wall in Detroit, so that one is not happening this year, again, despite how good they looked with 14 wins in the regular season. Sweezy also had a prediction about Dallas missing the playoffs. Gotta say that one's not going to happen, although they too were bounced in the first round. But they did win 12 games and were the top wild card, and they even locked their seed up with a week to spare. So 0 for 2, unfortunately, Sweezy. Though again, we don't judge. They were called hot takes for a reason. People did go out on a limb and make some bold predictions. Not surprising that a lot of them didn't manifest, because you're kind of going against the grain by a hot take. But Carolina and Dallas, or Carolina falling short, Dallas making it into the playoffs as the 5 seed. So 0 for 2 there. Minnow said the Bills should have given up on Asensio. This is another one that I was on board with for a while. But now, looking at it at the end of the season, I am not so sure if they didn't do the right thing by hanging around and giving him an extension. Asensio this year in the regular season, 445 on 715 attempts. So a ton of attempts, but completed 62% of them for 4,700 yards, 26 touchdowns, 19 interceptions. A bit high on picks, but better than 1-to-1, which some quarterbacks can't say even that. He was sacked 64 times, which is second most in the league to only James Hickson of the Raiders. Ended up 6th in yards, tied for 6th in touchdown passes, 14th in quarterback rating. So for a guy who's due $5.5 million next year and less than 7, 6.83 to be precise, in 2028, not bad. So should they have given up on him? No. Will he be their franchise quarterback, or is this a 2-year bridge to another guy? That I can't say. But I will disagree with that hot take that they should have given up on him. Again, I have the benefit of hindsight. I feel like in week 1 I was on board with this. I was surprised they gave him the extension, but maybe he just needed some time to marinate there in Buffalo. Sagage said the Detroit Lions were winning the NFC North. That did not happen. They ended up getting swept by the Packers, and the Packers retained their NFC North crown. But Detroit did win 11 games. They made it into the playoffs as a 6th seed and just pulled off a huge win. So they are equal with the Packers in the terms that both made the divisional playoffs. So I'm going to give this a little bit of a boost, considering how well the Lions have played. An 11-win season, a playoff berth, a playoff win on the road. They did not win the North, so I suppose I should say thumbs down on that. But their season isn't over yet, and they are on par with the Packers. So credit for calling out the Lions as potential for having a successful season and a playoff run. I think that looks more prescient now than it did before. Finally, Sarge said Kansas City is going to win their division and show you can revamp in a single offseason. This is another one where technically, no, they didn't win their division. The prediction did not come true. But that second half about revamping in an off season, absolutely true. Kansas City improved 6 games from last year. They went 12-5, secured the top wild card. They added David Chop and Ellswick, completely revamped that offense, and now they won a playoff game, which, again, last year when they were 6-11 did not seem possible. Especially, and I love pointing this out, still having a first and second round pick in the upcoming draft for what they've acquired. I think the spirit of this hot take was correct in that Kansas City proved that you can make a big turnaround if you're willing to make a splash and make the right kind of splash. Picking up Chop, adding Ellswick, revamping that offense, and turning that into a team to be reckoned with. I think they have absolutely done that. So even though they finished second in the division behind the Broncos, credit for Sarge calling Kansas City's very quick rise. Nuke Bomb said David Chop MVP. This is another one that I've changed on over the season. I said maybe in week 1, given how you define MVP. I think his stats have fallen off in recent weeks, so it makes it a little easier to say no. I'm sure proponents would argue that MVP doesn't just have to be statistical. You can talk about, again, the value that one player added and David Chop's role in turning the Chiefs from a bottom feeder into a playoff contender. However, again, they've gotten help with Ellswick and some of the other players they've acquired, and Chop has come down to earth a little bit as his competition has gotten stiffer. So this one is the most, I think, open to interpretation. I do not think Chop would be my MVP, but he absolutely should be in the conversation at a national level for the work that he has done in the Chiefs and how he's completely changed that franchise around. So I don't know if I'm willing to give him MVP credit, but I'm going to give him some credit. Fireball Sod, Michael Oliveros is a massive bust, and so far, I gotta say, I don't disagree with him. Oliveros in his rookie campaign, 197 of 356, that's a 55% completion rating, just short of 1,600 yards, 4 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, but the big kicker for the scrambling quarterback, 157 carries, 328 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 fumble. So barely 2 yards a carry for the scrambling quarterback, I think is what's really damning about that performance. He didn't have as many carries early. Team did find a way to get him more as the season went on, to the tune of, looks like about 9 a game on average. 328 rushing yards as a scrambling quarterback isn't going to get it done. Compare that to, Travis Neeble in his rookie campaign had fairly similar passing yards and completion percentage. Similar percentage, a few more yards, and actually had twice the picks. He had 18 interceptions to just 3 touchdowns. But Neeble had 1,600 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns in that rookie campaign. And that's the difference, that what he lacked in arm strength, he made up for in the air. Him and Ryan Johnson were a powerful 1-2 rushing combo. So Oliveros, I'm not surprised at the completion rating or the yardage or even the interceptions, but the lack of running production is worrying. And of course, with that F potential, there's a question of how patient the Patriots are going to be, especially sitting on the top pick. So I don't know that the Patriots will go quarterback immediately and reload immediately, but I think for where they took him and what they were hoping he would be for their franchise, I have to agree that the bust label is apt, at least through the first season. Too early to call. I feel like it's on the table at the very least. So as for a hot take, I think I'm on board at this juncture. And then I had my own hot take that less than half of the division champions would repeat. I thought half was a pretty decent guess. I had to be a hot take and go even more than half. In fact, it was less than that. There were only 3 new division champions, and that's Pittsburgh, Tennessee, and Carolina. And Carolina, honestly, feels like kind of a gimme, given that they were a playoff team last year and lost on a tiebreaker to the Falcons. So Miami, Denver, Washington, Green Bay, and the LA Rams all repeated. I thought the Jets might push. Well, the Jets did push Miami. Miami ultimately won 15 games, came out on top. I thought the Lions might push Green Bay. Again, Green Bay swept them head-to-head and were able to win the division. So I missed out on that one. We had only 3 new division champions. And perhaps most surprising is that for the first time in league history, we did not have a new playoff, a brand new playoff team, a team make the playoffs who had never made before. We had some get in who weren't in last year, so by that definition, we had some new playoff teams compared to 2025. We are still waiting for 7 teams, 7 different franchises to make the playoffs for the first time, and we were not able to add to that list this year. So marking me down for missing my hot take that we would have more new division champions than we did. So that's how we all fared. Again, it's really easy in hindsight to look back and say, well, yeah, we were all wrong, but they're hot takes. They're supposed to be big swings. Credit to everyone for putting themselves out there, and no judgment for the league taking a more typical turn than maybe some of us were hoping for. But that is all I have for this edition of the SimNFL show. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back next week for more coverage of the 2026 playoffs and more looks ahead to 2027 and beyond. But I'll sign off for now. And as I say to all users in all of our sims, good luck and have fun.